G'day everyone, it is Coach Michelle J. Raymond back to continue with our series of how can marketers get planning for 2025. And when I was thinking about what would make a great episode, I was thinking, what does LinkedIn think we should be doing in 2025? And lucky for me, one of my connections, Robin O'Connell, who's based here and works for LinkedIn in Australia, he's been there for nearly 10 years, has agreed to come on and share some insights. So Robin, I really appreciate you joining me.
Of course, happy to be here.
Now, one of the things that I'm going to go into first, which I think is causing a bit of grief for people out there, is the fact that we've gone over 1 billion members. We're coming up to 70 million company pages. The platform is pretty crowded, and trying to get attention seems to be harder and harder as the year goes on. And I'm thinking it's going to be that way in 2025. What do you think we can expect going into the new year?
Yeah, for sure. And you're right, it definitely feels like LinkedIn is getting busier and busier. So more than 1 billion members now on the platform, which is crazy to think about. When I started in LinkedIn in Dublin, I think we had just about 200 million members. So there's been crazy growth in the past 10 years or so. And I think one of the surprises might be with over 1 billion members now, that LinkedIn audience is pretty different than what it used to be. So maybe a question for you, Michelle, is any idea what the fastest growing part of the LinkedIn audience is globally? What do you think that might be?
Metrical has released a few new features that help social media managers to centralize their management and content planning. And two new features include Google Drive and Canva integrations, bringing your content assets directly into the planner. So this eliminates the need to jump across multiple platforms and tabs. A huge win for my LinkedIn community is Metrical's expanded LinkedIn demographic analytics. You can now view followers by industry, function, seniority, and company size. And this data is crucial for creating content that connects with your ideal audience. Also, if you currently add links to your LinkedIn content, you can now enable or disable link previews within Metrical's planner. Metrical just keeps on rolling out new great features to create a truly comprehensive user experience. Read the full article with Metrical's latest product updates in the show notes. I'm going to guess it's Gen Z, like
Oh,
all
you
the
nailed it.
and this is only because I do some work with a client where we've been talking about the changing workforce. And given LinkedIn is the professional platform, I was thinking this has got to be aligned with that. And sometimes I'm not going to lie, I feel a bit old on the platform. I feel like there's so many new younger generations coming through. So tell me, how does that impact the platform?
Yeah, you've ruined my big surprise. You got it in one, but you're exactly right. It is Gen Z is that fastest growing cohort. And that in itself brings a whole new layer to the platform. And so there are really interesting trends associated with that, such as growth in video as a huge one. You've seen the LinkedIn investment in vertical video. And some of you might have spotted that video tab now on the mobile that's ramped to a certain amount of our members. That is because of the growth and the popularity of that content. So video is a cornerstone of the LinkedIn strategy going forward, and there's going to be more and more investment there. The breadth of that audience is really interesting. Another thing I found out recently when doing a little bit of research for a government client was that if you look at nurses and healthcare professionals on the platform in Australia, there's now more than 1 million nurses and healthcare professionals on LinkedIn, which is mind blowing to think about, right? Because we tend to think of LinkedIn as this suit and tie network for professionals with desk jobs, but it really has grown way beyond that. And you're right, I think, in saying with that growth in audience comes a growth in competition. And there's more than 2 million advertisers on the platform trying to reach essentially the same audience. And so you have a lot of people that are trying to break through with a very valuable audience. And I think with that increase in competition, yes, it can be more difficult to reach an audience. But the good news, I think, for anyone listening is that there's still a huge amount of white space because so many brands do the same thing on LinkedIn. They play it safe, right? And I think as a marketer, as a business owner, as a brand, when you're thinking about reaching the professional audience on LinkedIn, you think, okay, how can I adapt my message? And how should I sound and look and feel on LinkedIn? And you start to adopt a more professional tone. And then suddenly everyone starts to sound like each other. When you're thinking of 2025 and what to expect, yes, a bigger audience, yes, more brands competing, but also huge white space and opportunity to stand out on the platform.
I really get a bit concerned when some of my clients that I start working with say, we've done a lot of competitor research. And then by accident, I don't think that they do it intentionally, but what they do is they end up almost copying their competitors because they think they've been doing it, it's working for them, and it absolutely crushes their performance. And today's episode is all about how do we break free from boring and how can B2B brands really win on LinkedIn. I want to help as many people as we can because, as you said, the more that we end up just looking and sounding like everyone else, we're just blending into the crowd, which is the complete and utter opposite to what we want. But this can be easily fixed. And we're going to talk about that. So stick around to the end because we've got lots of solutions to the most common problems coming up. One of the problems that I think happens is a lot of the B2B brands that I come across are really playing things safe with their content, like so safe. I'm going to throw it out there. And you had this in an article that sparked us having this conversation, is that it is so dull that it puts you to sleep. And pretty much, yes, they're safe. No one's interested. They certainly don't get any engagement. But how do we get brands beyond safe? Like, what can we do here?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I think it should be at the forefront of any marketer or business owner's mind coming into 2025 is how do you stick out? There is definitely a cost associated to it. And so System One, who are a fantastic ad research company who publish some amazing research papers, they have published a white paper called The Extraordinary Cost of Dull. And I think it's such a clever framing for this, actually thinking about what are the costs associated with being boring or with just not standing out? And because you have to pay more in terms of paid media to reach enough people to make an impact when your content isn't as good, there's a pretty scary cost attached to creating dull or uninteresting content. And as part of that research that they did, they actually looked at how many brands were sticking out or how many brands were creating ads and content that was likely to create large business effects. And the scary thing here is that they found that about 75% of B2B ads were unlikely to drive positive long-term business outcomes. But if you really think about it, that's 3 in every 4 B2B ads that are created are going to have no impact. Yeah. And it's really scary. It is a scary thing. And I think it's really important to think about why that is and then how we can start to potentially fix it. And if you think about the why, like it's because it's the logical approach. Like if we're selling finance solutions or consulting services or maybe trucking solutions, it's a serious business, right? So we have to be seen as thought leaders and we should publish research and we'll count how many people download our reports and we'll pass those people on through the funnel to salespeople who will convert them. But there's a big problem, I think, with that approach. Number one is that you start to look and sound like everyone else, right? Because you are taking yourself very seriously. You're very focused on your product or solution. You're very focused on the logical, rational B2B buying decision. All B2B buyers are people. They're emotional and they take shortcuts. And one of the biggest shortcuts they're going to take is in order to be, to take on less risk, they'll go for brands that are known and they will try and choose brands that they perceive as big, safe brands. And if we're not putting ourselves into that space, if we're not becoming known and we're not making our brand as big as possible, we're just not likely to be successful. And that is really important. Just thinking about the fact that the brand that gets remembered is the brand that gets bought. And thinking about instead of trying to get people to download our white papers and take action, think about how can we drive memories of our brand? How can we grow our brand by reaching more people and sticking out to them? And I think that is the golden rule when we think about strategy for B2B marketing, is really thinking about building lasting memories so we're top of mind when people are purchasing.
Can we make t-shirts that say the brand that gets remembered is the brand that gets bought? I think everyone should have one. If you haven't trademarked that already, I'm going to steal it because that is absolutely it. And it comes back to again, not blending into the background of with all your competition. Like, what is the thing that distinguishes you, that makes you stand out? I've read a lot of the research that the B2B Institute and other LinkedIn partners have put out, and being able to recall is so important because we are getting bombarded with information, and it's easy just to say, oh, it's just LinkedIn. How much information are people really getting bombarded with? But it's not just on LinkedIn. It's all day, every day, email inboxes, news, ads, radio, whatever people are watching or listening to. We're competing with that at the end of the day, not just what's happening in this little tiny slice of somebody's life. So I love that idea. And I think I'm going to put it on a t-shirt just because I want people to remember that there is so much of a reward for taking a different approach, like you said. And I'm still back at, honest to God, 75% of those ads are, your money's just going down the drain. And I know that nobody sets out to do that intentionally. Like, I know that people are diligently trying to do things. And I was having a look for a client the other day, and I went through the ads library that you can look at on LinkedIn to see what is it that people are putting out there, inspired by one of your posts around B2B brands getting creative. And honestly, I'm surprised that stat's not a little bit higher, because I'm going to say it's pretty much everything we're saying, but different. Please sign up here, download our stuff, and everything just looked like a template, which there's pros and cons for everything. But I think templates are, definitely killing content, whether it's paid or organic, and how can we work around that? I have empathy for people that work in businesses, and especially the bigger the corporate, it seems to be the more rules and more layers that there can often be. So it might start with branding guidelines, and then we work our way through. How do you think brands can find that balance between building a consistent brand in line with those brand guidelines and really that creative storytelling? I genuinely think they're stuck in a tug of war. And I think we need to address this before we can move on to some other ideas.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's such an important question. On this t-shirt business that we're starting with, the brand that gets remembered is the brand that gets bought. As much as I would love to claim that phrase, it definitely isn't mine. I've heard it from the B2B Institute, the amazing think tank here at LinkedIn, and I'm sure it came from someone else. So I'll put that caveat in there. Love the phrase, haven't coined it. But we'll gladly profit off the t-shirts. Nice. In terms of this question, Michelle, around, like the template versus kind of the license to be creative, I think it is genuinely the $1 million question, probably the multi-million dollar question, is how do we balance that? And it's two really important opposing sides here, right? Because on one end, you have the consultants and the experts and the marketers who will point at stats, and it's something crazy. 70 or 80% of ads don't get recognized from being from the correct brand. That is a major issue. And let me tell you honestly, if you create a perfect piece of content, perfectly targeted, tells an amazing story, and it's not remembered about being from you or being from your company or your brand, then it's been a pointless exercise. So it is so important that you get that brand recognition. Otherwise, you're just advertising for your competitors, which is the cardinal sin in marketing. So it's really important to have the brand fluency and the brand recognition. I once asked my partner what her favorite ad was, and she described to me in great detail this brilliant ad for beer that I posted about on LinkedIn yesterday, right? And it had this song that she was able to sing to me about it being a big ad with this epic music and this epic video. And she said it was her favorite ad. And I asked her what brand created the ad, and she said she had no idea. It was an Australian beer ad. And so even the greatest ads, the best ads, struggle with this, right? They create amazing beer ads, but do they do enough to be remembered as the brand that created it or the brand that kind of got this message across? So it is really important. And then on the other side of this debate and the other side of the coin here is around creativity. And if you talk to creatives, the running joke will be you gather a bunch of people in a room and you show them a piece of content, and the first thing they'll say is make the logo bigger. It's like the classic piece of feedback that a creative gets is just make the brand bigger, make the logo bigger, put in a jingle. And they think it gets in the way of creativity. And so these are the two sides of the debate, right? There's the need for recognition, and then there's the license to be creative. And the balancing act between those two is absolutely critical. And so the question is, what is the balance? And I think there's no perfect formula here. But at the end of the day, there has to be guidelines, right? If you're a tiny brand, if you're a one-man band, if you're a 50-person company, or if you're a multi-billion-dollar company, you need to have a list of your brand assets, right? Your brand assets that get you recognized. You need to make a top three, and you need to invest in those over and over again. It can be your logo, your tagline, your colors, maybe your founder, right? Maybe the person behind the brand, but they need to be featured consistently. But you need to do that in as creative a way as possible. And to borrow another term from a B2BI, B2B Institute research, we often talk about story arcs. Next time you're thinking about branding, especially in a video, think about branding arcs, right? E or C. Because you want to get your branding early. It's really important. Regularly, so not just once. You have to do it throughout the content. And then creatively. How do you creatively get your asset in there? And that's a really important question. And I think there's a few brands that are doing this in a really interesting way. One I came across this morning, I'm a big fan of MailChimp and what MailChimp do on LinkedIn. So go check out their company page, check out some of their content. But what they're starting to do is they're trying to use MailChimp as a verb. They're creating pieces of content where marketers MailChimp the solution, or they MailChimp their marketing efforts to make it more simple, to make it more effective. So Uber or Google, right? We use those as verbs all the time. MailChimp are trying to get MailChimp recognized as a verb so you can MailChimp something. And that for me is a great way of using a brand asset, right? Using the brand name really creatively. And I think that is the solution between creativity and template is we need to have our list of brand assets. We need to use them all of the time, but we have to allow license for creativity. And we should be thinking about how do we creatively tell the story where we get the brand assets in and we have the brand asset front and center, but not necessarily in a templated way, not in a way that it's the exact same every time. So the brand asset is the same every time. The way you introduce it or use it may be different. And it's difficult, but if you can get that right, that I think is the sweet spot.
I love it. And if you're really new to this podcast and you haven't been listening for a while, there was an episode that I did towards the end of last year with Professor Jenny Ruminek, who has written a book and done a lot of research into distinctive brand assets, which is a must read for any marketers, especially starting out in this space, to really understand what makes something distinct and also the importance, because these things are generating a return. And this is what I want people to understand is that it's not risk for risk's sake. It's not being creative for creative sake. This is how we're growing your business. This is how we're attracting the right types of customers. And these little distinctive assets, I remember she was saying to me, this is why a lot of brands now that have mascots or some kind of character attached to them, whether it's Salesforce or whether that Duolingo owl owns LinkedIn. When the owl comments on a post, that comment is getting 400 likes. So for people that say company pages don't work, I'm like, yeah, I think they're just so boring. It's the power of brand, which is what we're creating here to stand out and be memorable. So absolutely love the ideas of having these little characters and mascots around the place to really plant that seed. I don't think you need to have a huge budget to be creative and think, how else can you do this? And I use a simple example. When I was speaking at Social Media Marketing World, I met a brand who comes from an industry where they make perfumes and sell all the ingredients that go into fragrances and things. So a manufacturing company, family-owned business, but what they created was a character sticker of the owner who has a peculiar look about him that really stands out. And they were handing out stickers. So he became the character. And there's so many tools these days that can help you with things like that. I want to talk about something slightly different because I have a sales heart. I spent 20 years in B2B sales. So when it comes to marketing, that's something that I probably learned more over the last 4 or 5 years. And it's a really interesting thing to see how marketers go around selling, especially on LinkedIn. So I think with a lot of the clients that I speak to in the B2B marketing space is that they see LinkedIn purely as a lead gen platform, i.e. you've got all the right buyers there, the decision makers. You have the amazing ability to target these people. And quite often, the content that they're creating is just sign up, download, go to our website. Here's our white paper, anything to get that coveted little email address. So you can go in, as you said, to the funnel and go down that process. But what are the risks if we're creating content just with lead gen in mind? Because I feel like this is almost the cost of dull. I think the cost of purely focusing on lead gen would be even higher.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it's a mistake that I see brands make kind of time and time again. But there's a lot of issues with just focusing on lead generation, and I get why we do it. It's because it's easy to quantify, right? You can go back to the sales and say my efforts resulted in X revenue, right? Or I've created this amount of pipeline, and so I'm not discounting that approach. That is important, and I would say that you need to keep doing that. You need to keep having that mentality with your lead generation activities. But if you only do lead generation and you don't focus on building memories of your brand and optimizing towards memory, there's a lot of different issues will start to pop up, and you might recognize some of these. So the first is that over time, your lead generation efforts are going to start to decline, right? And that is because we're losing out on future customers when we're only focusing on customers that are in the market right now. So Professor John Dawes at the Ehrenberg Bass Institute has done incredible research here around the 95-5 rule. And that rule basically tells you that if you look at your audience, so your total audience who can buy from you in a given quarter, only about 5% of that audience will buy in the category, right? From you and competitors. Only 5% of your audience will buy in a quarter. So 95% of your audience are out of market. They're not going to buy today, tomorrow, or this quarter. But they are future customers. They will buy from the category in the future, just not this quarter. And what that means is that the 95% majority, they are not going to notice the lead generation activities or pay attention to them or act on them because they're not in market. They don't care. They don't care about your product specs. They don't care about your webinar because they're not currently in market for that solution. And you felt this yourself, okay? If your washing machine breaks and you need to buy a new washing machine, you'll start to see washing machine ads everywhere because you're in market and you're caring about that. And then for the rest of the year, maybe the rest of your life, depends when you buy your next washing machine, but you're just not going to notice those ads because you're not in market. And so it's two very different approaches, right? So for lead generation, we focus on rational proof points. My washing machine has the best features. It's at the best price point. You can get a deal. You can talk to a dealer today and you can buy it this quarter. For those that aren't in market, when you're talking about building your brand and kind of focusing on long-term marketing solutions, you're not optimizing towards action today. You're talking about a broad brand message told in a really creative way with a story behind it. So that person remembers you next time they're in market, they're doing the research and they're building a list of brands they want to buy from, you're going to be on that list. So that's really important. We don't want to alienate these future customers. We want to warm them up. So our lead generation activity is more effective next quarter and the quarter beyond. And so that's the first thing is you'll lose out on future customers and you won't optimize towards better lead generation over time if you just focus on customers today. The second issue is that we don't differentiate, and we've already covered this, right? There are so many brands focused on trying to win that 5% today. And if we only talk to the 5% like every other brand is doing, it's really creative and it's really hard to stand out. And so that is another big issue is that we can't really differentiate ourselves. And then the third and the final issue there is that I think we stifle our own creativity when we focus on the 5% in market constantly because it's rational, product orientated proof points talking to the customer about why they should take an action today. And it's not thinking big about our strategic storytelling around pain points that a customer has and why we're the right brand to meet those pain points. And so if you only focus on lead generation, your results over time will start to decline. And it's because number one, you're not focusing on future customers. Number two, you sound like all of your competitors. And then number three, you're not actually allowing yourself to be very creative. And so my advice is on LinkedIn or to be honest, on any other platform, you got to be thinking with two minds. the short-term customers of today who we're trying to capture, and then the long-term customers of tomorrow who we're trying to build memories with. And if you can do both of those things at once, that's when you see great long-term results. And so that, I think, is the optimal strategy. And that balance is far more important than just lead generation today.
I love it. Now, I'm very confident that listeners can now see possibly the error of their ways, but I always like to finish with how they can take action. Like, how are we going to flip the script on this and really give people results? Because I think that's the important piece. It's all well and good to understand that there's a cost to being dull. We don't want to focus on lead gen content specifically. We're going to not be memorable. We're going to blend in. But Robin, can you share with me what are 3 ways that you think that we can really flip the script on these risks and get focused on those that are out of market right now, or differentiate, as you said?
I could talk about this all day, so I'll try and condense it down. But there's a few different things that we could do. And to give you one really practical tip, what I would do is make a list of your competitors, right? Your top competitors. I would go to the LinkedIn ads library. I would punch in the competitor name and the country you're operating in. And then I would check and see what your competitors are doing. Do that for each brand and see what your competitors are doing. And instead of thinking, oh, we should do this like they're doing, or we should try this like they're doing, think about if everyone is going left, what does going right look like? And if we can do that, I think that's a great mentality to have to stick out and to capture attention. What aren't they doing? Are they not using videos to tell stories? Are they all focused on lead gen? Can we focus on something a bit broader, a bit more strategic? Think about what your competitors are doing and then think about what you can do differently. I think that is a really good step to make. Look at what everyone else is doing and then try and go the other way. I think the second thing that I would think about doing here is when it comes to the content itself. If we're thinking about optimizing for memories and trying to get our brand remembered, keep in mind that if I tell you that my solution is the best price point and it has AI capabilities and your finance team are going to love it and it has a really good warranty and the specs, it gets lost really quickly. Okay, so challenge yourself to get down to one key message. What is one sentence, one phrase that you want your customer to take away? And make that phrase be the building block for your content. And really try and invest in that phrase or that one sentiment. And it's difficult, especially if you have a good product or if you're selling consulting services or you're selling yourself as a consultant even. It's really hard to narrow it down to one thing because your product does amazing things, your consultants do amazing things, your solution does amazing things for your customers. But you have to try and narrow it down to one thing so that it is remembered. And so I think that is really important as well. And then finally, I would think about injecting creativity. And the way that I see that kind of done in B2B right now is using emotion. And I think in so much B2B content that I see today, it's so rational. It's so proof point orientated. It doesn't really surface emotion. And I think study after study will show you that emotion is more likely to be remembered. If you can create that emotional connection, it's going to be remembered. People remember stories and they remember how something made them feel. And so if you can bring emotion to the fore, you're also much more likely to be successful. I think the easiest way to do that is humor. I think the easiest way is to inject humor into your content. I'm talking about memes. I'm talking about funny short videos. I'm talking about ways that you can not take yourself so seriously as a B2B brand. I think that breaks through time and time again. And to give you an example here, and there's so many examples I can share right now, but in that article that we discussed, Michelle, that I wrote around brands that are doing this really well on LinkedIn, the 3 I highlighted were number 1 is Google Ads in Australia right now. They're using Sharon Strzelecki. I hope you've seen the campaign. It is brilliant, really funny video, really funny piece of content, and one that I think we can share with everyone to check out or even just give it a Google. The second is Canva. I think Canva are doing this really well in a few different spots, particularly in Japan. So they have a great brand campaign running in Japan right now where they flip the concept of design on its head a little bit. They have a gangster boss and his employee talking about this design that the boss has made. And the employee simply doesn't believe that the boss could have made it so easily. and it gets him into a pretty sticky situation. But of course, the boss has made it that easily because he's using Canva. And so it's a really funny story, really well told, and resonates really well with that audience. And then finally, I would say MailChimp. I really like what MailChimp are doing. And if you're looking for a brand that gets the long term and the short term, just have a look at their content on the ads library. You'll see the short videos optimized to create in a memory. And then you'll see the static ads with the proof points. 75% faster, 80% more efficiency, whatever it is. But it's the balance of those two things that work really well for kind of a pretty robust strategy. So 3 brands that you can take away: Google Ads, Canva, and MailChimp. If you need more examples, message me. I'm happy to provide them. There is a lot right now, especially in Australia. I think we're doing it really well in certain spots. But overall, I would say focus on creativity, focus on emotion, try and use humor, and ultimately balance your strategy for the long term and the short term. That's when you see real success.
I love it. And Aussie, 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 like, because there are some cool things that are going on here. And Robin, I appreciate everything that you have shared with all of these great insights. I will put links to your article and how people can reach out and contact you in the show notes as well. As I tell all of my clients, it is okay to have a little bit of fun with your content on LinkedIn. You will never break a brand by doing one post and trying something. So going in with the experimenting mindset to figure out what will work, what is current, and have a look at what's not working for you right now. Maybe, as you said, try the opposite. Could be that simple. The answer could be right there in front of your eyes. And think about, if the platform is now over 65% of Gen Z, we've got them coming through, like, they're going to be your decision makers. Are you creating content that resonates with that audience as well? So, today's episode is exactly what I'd hope for the audience. This is what you need to start planning for success in 2025. So, Robin, is there any last actionable tip that you want to leave the listeners that you can think, you know what, go away and try this?
Yeah, have fun with it. Honestly, just have fun with it. Be your authentic self in your content. Again, yeah, that's something I see time and time again is people come to me and ask me what works on LinkedIn from a personal perspective. Being yourself is a big part of it. Being authentic. Anyone can use AI to create a post. By the way, this is the first time we've mentioned AI, I think, Michelle, in this podcast, which is maybe a record for 2024. It took us 34 minutes to mention AI. That's crazy. So I'm pretty proud of that one. But as I said, look, anyone can use AI to create a generic piece of content. Only you can create content that is authentic to you. So have fun, be yourself, test it out, put it out there. I know it can be hard to do, but I guarantee you, once you see the results and once you start to get it right, it's just going to be an absolute game changer for you, your personal brand, and ultimately your company's growth as well. So that is my takeaway tip: is be yourself and have fun with it.
And that is a huge ditto for me. And I think the perfect place to wrap this up. So until you and I have our successful business selling t-shirts on the side, thank you so much. We'll still be sharing all of our knowledge around how to get the most out of LinkedIn for business growth. So thanks again for coming on the show. Until next week's listeners, cheers.